Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about, some interesting news coming out on the approval rating. Joe Biden, 63% in his first approval rating. And you go, Trump never got anywhere close to that. There was never a moment where that was going to happen. But 63%, I mean, that sends me a message that there are people across the political spectrum who want good government and who sees Biden coming out and taking us back to somewhere near the normal level as a good thing. Now, obviously, you had a large number of Republicans, 70% of Republicans said, no, we disapprove. But you had 94% of Democrats, 62% of independents. People were saying, look, we got to fight the virus. And look, what could you not be happy about at this point? We're going to actually have a functional government that is actually doing something to finally address the needs of we the people in whipping this virus. Day one, 10 executive orders on setting up ways of distributing, of administering, of making sure we use the Defense Production Act, just down the line, setting up testing places, setting up vaccination sites, all stuff that should have been done over the summer, all preparation work that should have been done already in anticipation of this horrible period that we're living through right now. Could have had all this done. Should have been, because look, not to take anything away from Joe Biden. And I like Joe. But this is like page 1 of Pandemics for Dummies. I mean, this is the simple stuff. Making sure that you have a distribution network so that when you create the virus, the antivirus, you get the vaccine stuff, you can distribute it. You can get it where it needs to go. And then on the other end, make sure that you have people who can then use it. I mean, it seems pretty simple, but we didn't really do that great of a job at preparing for this. So just on the hey, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We're making government functional. He has my absolute approval, without question. Now he's done a bunch of other things that I really like. And obviously, we're going to be talking about that over the next few hours and the next weeks. Because look, they're going to keep rolling. We got a lot to clean up, a lot to fix. And look, here's the thing. And I've been saying this all along. If Democrats don't want to get slaughtered in 2022, they got to do the good work. They got to go out there and be the missionaries who are out there bringing the good. They've got to pass things. They got to get their what together. Stop with the circular firing squads. Stop shooting each other in the foot, and get this country moving again. And one of those things is I saw Chuck Schumer, and look, I've said before, not a huge Chuck Schumer fan, but since he's been majority leader, I'm going. We'll see. I'm guardedly optimistic. Can we go with that? He has figured out how to say, look, we got to get this rescue package passed. We've got to do it with or without the Republicans. And I love that mentality. Say, look, this has to happen. We could bicker around the edges, but eventually it has to get done, and it's got to be done quickly. So make your objections. Let's have them heard. Let's have this debate. Say your piece, and then we vote on it. And then we move forward on it. And this is where, again, the filibuster has been the thorn in the side of progress for a very long time. Especially these secret, we never get to find out who was behind the latest filibuster. So things just die. I'm of the mindset, you got to get the votes. If you get the votes, things got to pass. I said from the beginning, on a filibuster, I would love to see us go back to the good old days, to where if you really were opposed to something, if you're really opposed to it, then you hold the floor. You go with your empty jug, wear some shorts, and you just keep talking. And in a minute, when you need to go, you got the jug, or bring a porta potty if you have to. But you got to keep talking. You got to hold the floor. That's a filibuster. This putting in a secret, oh well, gee, I'm against. No, that's not a filibuster. That's just killing something. So for me, the fact that Schumer has come out and said the work must move forward. He said preferably with our Republican colleagues, but without them if we must. He said time is of the essence to address this crisis. We're keeping all options on the table, and look, we need this rescue package. We need to get money into people's hands. Now, is there some argument on maybe we shouldn't give it to everybody? I think there's an argument, but we're in a moment where we start bickering about this stuff, it all breaks down. We're in a moment where by taking it from some and giving it to others, you're going to cause division. So I've always been of the mindset of let's roll it out, let's move it along, let's make sure that we get what we need into the economy so it doesn't collapse. Because here's the thing, and this is something that I've been saying for years: when we give tax breaks, when we give tax incentives, when we give all that stuff, it always seems to end up in the hands of the very wealthy. I've always said, no, don't give it to them. Give it to the people at the bottom. Give what you would have given them to the people at the bottom, because they're going to get it anyway. But there's going to be at least a transaction involved that's going to keep jobs, going to keep the economy moving, going to move us in a more positive direction. And this is where I think, with this recovery plan, getting money into people's hands, getting money into state and local governments, and doing a lot of the other things that they're doing with this is not a bad thing. Now, what's interesting is I'm hearing some Republicans talking about, well, we really can't spend because, we were so fiscally responsible for the last 4 years, because we were so true to our ideological squeeze the quarter till the eagle screams. We were so true to that. And now we've found our soul somehow. It's crazy. Good news today. Evidently, Pfizer is going to be able to deliver 200 million additional doses by the end of May. That's a good thing, as Biden and the administration is going to buy them. And I think, yep, good idea. They claim to have they'll have 120 million doses by the end of March. 20 million more are promised as we continue down the road, and they're going to get to 200 million, and that's a good thing. Because ultimately, the quicker we get people vaccinated, the quicker we get, everybody with some protection, the quicker we get to go back to life. And I don't know anybody who's happy about what's going on. And I know I listen to some of my MAGA friends who are like, well, everybody wearing masks and you just want to control us. No, nobody wants to control you. I hate wearing a mask as much as anybody. But at the end of it, the idea is, the sooner we get past this, the sooner we get to clean up the other messes. The sooner we get to start talking about how do we rebuild our infrastructure, how do we get good paying jobs and rebuild that American dream. Very short period of time. I don't want to spend this whole year, and I'm sure the Biden administration does not want to spend this whole year fighting this virus, which is why they have come out in such a big way. Because we know it works. And yet there is still a large segment of our population hell-bent on keeping it bad, on continuing through their petulance and their selfishness to continue to make this worse. And at some point, you got to hold them accountable. Now, I do find it interesting. There's been some really bizarre stuff in these. Again, I don't know how as a country we got so crazy. And I know, look, we've always had crazy people among us. And I don't want to demean the mentally challenged, but we've always had people who do really outrageously stupid stuff. And I look at this pharmacist in Wisconsin who evidently pled guilty to spoiling dozens of vials of the vaccine. He's facing 20 years in prison. I guess he agreed to plead guilty, so we'll see what his sentence is going to be. But this 46-year-old guy claimed that it's the end of the world, and just a whole bunch of stuff. one of those things where you go, where did you get so off the wall? You know, I struggle with this because there are people who do just dumb stuff. And what they do is it's not, look, if you want to do something stupid to yourself, go ahead. But the fact that they're trying to, this guy's trying to harm others is really crazy. And now look, he admits that he had this conspiracy idea in his head that somehow the vaccine was going to mutate, and that it was going to do something to the people's DNA, and he was actually saving them. But this just goes to prove there are these wackadoodles out there at every level. And then there are people who are just trying to get a hold of the vaccine. And I look at this case out of Florida where this guy who was paramedic of the year. Evidently, he helped steal some of the vaccines because this guy's supervisor wanted it for his mother. They were trying to get other people these vaccines, and this guy gets fired trying to steal them. Which I guess 2 points. Obviously, first, this is horrible that someone feels that they have to steal it. And we should be doing much more to get everybody vaccinated and get those people who want it as quickly as possible. But two, and just kind of out there on the fringe. I guess a good thing is we're keeping track of this stuff. That maybe this is there's something being done right. And I so want to go back to those days. I so want to have our government functional because what's happened over the last 40 years is we've had this direct assault on anything that our government does. Because my entire working life, I've been told government's bad, and I still remember hearing Reagan say the 9 worst words you're ever going to hear is "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." I disagree with that fundamentally. And I look at my own life and I say, there have been times government has helped. When I was a kid, we had to get food stamps so that we could eat. We made it through rough times. When we got a housing subsidy to move out of the projects that we moved into a better neighborhood, into better schools, had an opportunity to get a better education. When my mother passed, I was able to get, Social Security's survivor benefit. That helped my grandparents pay for me to be able to live with them instead of an institution. Things got better. There was a hand there. And because of that, and I go back and I think about this, because I had someone say, "Wow, you're just someone who just sucked off the system." I'm going, no. Because I've paid a ton of taxes back. I'm someone who got a helping hand. I'm someone who our system, our social safety net, was at that time strong enough to give me a hand up. And because of that, I've been able to lead a very, very good life. I've done very well for myself. Maybe not as well as Jeff Bezos, but much better than I could have ever imagined possible. And this is one of those moments where, as someone who truly does believe in government can do the right thing, can be functional, can address needs and problems, can do what we want them to do. And I use the word can only because you get some people in there who don't believe they can. And then set out to prove, see, told you they can't do it. So, for 4 years, we lived under an administration led by Republican leaders who have been telling us for decades that government is bad, government can't do anything, we need to leave it to the profit sector. And what happened? Well, when a real crisis hit, when an emergency hit, they couldn't deal with it. And they drove the car into the ditch. And not only did they drive the car into the ditch, they backed up and they drove it into the other ditch. And then when they got it out of the ditch, they drove it in front of a truck. And that's where we are now. We're cleaning up the wreck that the Republicans have left all over the highway. Over 400,000 people, and we're going to hit 500,000 people are going to lose their lives because of this. Because we didn't do pandemics for dummies. We didn't set up early testing sites. We didn't set up early sites to make sure that we were knowing whether or not we had this or not. Other countries did this pretty well. South Korea did it really well. And yet somehow we have the people who tell us that, government can't do anything right. See, look how bad. No, it's the people who are running it. And I'm telling you, over the next 6-8 months, I think Joe Biden is going to show, and I'm really hopeful in this, show that government can work. Have people say, well, we need smaller, less intrusive government. I'm going, no, I don't care whether it's small or big or medium. I don't care. I want it effective. I wanted to do the job that we needed to do. So in moments of pandemic, we follow the book. We do what has been the game plan from the beginning. And I know, evidently there was some miscommunication and they lost the book that Obama had left for them. And I believe they probably put it under a leg of a table to keep the table from jiggling around, or maybe because there weren't enough pictures. I'm not sure, but they didn't use it. We now have a guy who can read, who is functional, and is moving us in the right direction. So for me, good stuff. I'm hopeful for the coming weeks and months that we're going to get this under control and we're going to get moving in the right direction. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, going to talk a little bit about our gun nut Barbie. The gun nuts are back, aren't they? Every time something starts to go in the right direction, the fear and smear people, they got it. They're coming for your guns. They're coming. I haven't seen any legislation. If you have, I'd love to see it. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Show me where the gun grabbers are coming. All because Lauren Boebert couldn't pack her heat on the floor of the House. Crazy times. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1921. That was the day Sid Hatfield and 22 other defendants went on trial for the murder of Detective Albert Phelps. Hatfield was chief of police in Matewan, West Virginia, when the United Mine Workers came to Mingo County to organize coal workers. The Stone Mountain Coal Company moved to smash union activity. They brought in Baldwin Phelps detectives to evict union miners from company housing. Hatfield supported the miners' right to organize and urged locals to arm themselves. He confronted the detectives at the train depot as they were leaving town for the evening about the evictions they had just carried out. The detectives presented Hatfield with a phony arrest warrant. Surrounded by armed miners, a gun battle ensued, leaving at least 7 detectives and 4 townspeople dead in what is referred to as the Matewan Massacre. The trial was set in the Mingo County seat of Williamson, where Baldwin Phelps agents lined the streets to intimidate those sympathetic to Hatfield and the others. The prosecution hoped to prove that Phelps' murder was premeditated and used the testimony of paid spies who had previously attempted to gain Hatfield's trust and friendship. According to historian James Green, author of The Devil is Here in These Hills, the ACLU had advised defense attorneys to turn the trial into a prosecution of the coal operators by introducing in evidence the entire record of their conspiracy to deny the citizens of West Virginia of their legal rights. The defense successfully discredited these paid agents and won acquittal. When Hatfield and his deputies arrived back in Matewan, they were greeted as heroes by the entire town. Hatfield, however, had a target on his back and would be gunned down a year later, sparking a coal war which ended with the Battle of Blair Mountain. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So every Congress has their characters that have to distinguish themselves, and look, I'm always you always find good comic relief in some of these characters, and one of them now, for me anyway, is Gun Fetish Barbie, who has come out of Colorado. Lauren Boebert is her name. And look, she came in with this idea. We're going to gin up some fear. We're going to make really flashy videos of how we're carrying our Glock around. And the reason is they're going to cash in. It's all about the money. They may believe a little bit of it, but it's really about the cash, and there's a lot of it. So when she came in with her slick campaign, it's what it was really about. So she's turned into kind of like Annie Oakley with the Sarah Palin aw shucks, and it has brought some huge money for her. And now she's teamed up with Matt Gaetz, the media hound from Florida, who, boy, they've met each other. And Gaetz said I guess it was on Thursday, about Congress saying, no, I'm sorry, you can't carry your gun on the floor. He said that they're trying to disarm her on the floor of the House of Representatives because ultimately they're coming for you. And that's the fear, right? That's what they keep throwing at us. Anyone who wants gun sanity, anyone who doesn't want children slaughtered in their schools, somehow you're a gun grabber. And here to share some thoughts on, well, are the people who want gun sanity actual gun grabbers? That's why I've asked Poe Murray to come to talk with us. She's the co-founder and chairwoman of the Newtown Action Alliance and also the Newtown Action Alliance Foundation. Poe, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi, Rick. Nice to be with you tonight.
So you're a gun grabber. You just want to take everybody's guns. Anytime you talk about guns, you just want to grab them, right?
According to people like Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert, but we know that they don't tell the truth. They're not honest people, and they take advantage of the NRA rhetoric, to suit their needs. So let me just tell you my history. My neighbor was the shooter that shot 26 children and educators at Sandy Hook on December 14, 2012. We formed the Newtown Action Alliance after that horrific tragedy in our community to, create some legislative and cultural changes. And we helped to pass the second strongest gun laws in the nation in Connecticut after the tragedy. And guess what? People in Connecticut are able to own guns, and they enjoy their Second Amendment rights.
So say that again. You passed the second strongest gun laws in the country, and people still have guns?
Yes, people still have their guns. AR-15s and other weapons of war, regrettably, was grandfathered in, so that those who already own those guns had to register them. But yeah, in Connecticut, we gun owners are able to enjoy their Second Amendment rights and still protect their family and whatever that they want to do with their guns.
No, I mean, whenever you get into these discussions about any gun issue, it's a matter of, I have people who believe there should be absolutely no gun control whatsoever. And I've said, overwhelmingly, I would argue 100% of the population or 99.5% of the population believes we should have some form of gun control. Because the argument for me is not about whether we should have gun control. It's a matter of where you draw the line. And when we start talking about these weapons of war that you alluded to, this is something that I think, given what just happened in our nation's capital, I think we should be re-examining and maybe reconsidering, because I don't know that you need these things to protect your home unless you're protecting it from your neighbors.
That's right. AR-15s and other similar weapons, the semi-automatics, are the weapons of choice for mass shooters. And many of those insurrectionists own assault weapons. But Washington, D.C. has banned assault weapons, and they were not allowed to bring them to the Capitol on January 6th. I imagine there would have been a significant bloodbath if they were allowed to carry assault weapons on that day.
Now, in the days running up to the 6th, I was watching Parler and some of the right-wing social media, and they were talking about that, and there were people saying that they were going to bring theirs, and that if someone was going to take their gun, they were going to stack up the bodies. And you go, I'm just a guy who does a little radio program here. I saw this stuff. How is it possible that the people who are protecting our senators and our Congress people, how is it that the people who are in Homeland Security, they seem to have missed that and were completely left flat-footed and unprepared on that day?
Well, it's all the signs were there, like you said. You saw that on Parler, and looking back at what happened leading to that day, all the evidence was there that they were going to come armed and ready to do damage. And the authorities, law enforcement, and Capitol Police did what they could on that day, but they had poor leadership. It came from the top, including Donald Trump.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Now, being from Sandy Hook, I mean, some of the videos and some of the stuff that I've seen come out around that shooting, that horrible, horrific day, is I got to think, almost as bad as the event itself. This kind of denial and the mean, angry, hateful kind of rhetoric, spewed at the families. They're all crisis actors. This is all a fake. It's all a false flag. So, Poe, are you a crisis actor? Are you part of the conspiracy? Are you part of the cover-up? Are you part of that?
I'll pinch myself. I am not. I'm a real person. I'm a mom of 4 from Sandy Hook, and you can talk to everyone in my community that knows me and elsewhere that I am not a crisis actor. I'm a real human being, a normal person working to end gun violence in this country. And it's just reprehensible that people like Alex Jones and Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was elected in Georgia, could spread these conspiracy theories and re-victimize the families who have been directly impacted by the Sandy Hook tragedy, the Parkland tragedy, and other tragedies, and our community. We've been, tragically damaged by these horrific shootings already, and we don't need members of Congress and others to re-victimize us.
No, and you've got the news coming out today about the Q Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. She wrote, I guess, back in was it 2019 that it would be easier just to put a bullet in Nancy Pelosi's head, and something about hanging Obama and Hillary Clinton, and you could just this this kind of vitriol, and I go, this is exactly the person. I don't know that I really want to have a gun.
Exactly. She's not mentally fit to own a gun. We have to have higher standards for gun ownership, and members of Congress who threaten other members of Congress and other leaders in this country should not be able to own any firearms. And, we have called on her to resign because of it.
No, I mean, it's just crazy. But, going back to some of these videos and Alex Jones and these people who have just, the deniers that, none of this stuff could possibly be true because, when everybody who has a gun is a good guy, I guess. The kind of hatred, and maybe you've had some of this experience, the kind of vitriol, maybe you've got a story that you can share with us, because, I saw this. I'll be honest with you. I'm not somebody who's not opposed to violence when need be. Someone were to do to me what this person was doing to this family, I'd probably be in jail myself. I don't know how people put up with it and still deal with the emotional part of it, but the fact that they're doing it to them, that's the part that's infuriating to me, that there doesn't seem to be any consequences for these people who just spew the most vile kind of stuff. It's just crazy to me.
Yeah. Well, recently, a judge is allowing the Alex Jones case to go through, allowing the Sandy Hook families to pursue that. So hopefully going forward, there will be laws that protect the families, and that these conspiracy theorists will be put in jail for doing what they do. It's just disappointing that members of Congress, particularly the Republicans, are not standing by the families and just ensuring that this doesn't happen again.
No, that's an excellent point, because where are our statesmen? Where are our leaders to stand up and say, no, you're being ridiculous? And I know, right. Look, it's easy to stoke your base and go along with the crazy and do the dog whistle stuff so that you get their money and their votes. But at some point, there's got to be that John McCain moment. I didn't vote for John McCain, didn't much like him as a senator, but I respect the fact that this was a guy who stood up and said, no, come on, he's a good family man, he's an American. There's some depth I'm not willing to go. Where are those politicians? Where are those leaders who are going to say, look, come on, you're just being stupid?
Yeah, well, with 147 members of Congress working to disqualify the 81 million votes in this country for Joe Biden, it tells you where they're at currently. They're certainly not the Republican Party that I grew up with. It's a Trump party, and they represent something that's deeply amoral and unethical in this country.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree just a little bit there, because all of this has been coming for a very long time. I mean, I always used to joke about when Pat Buchanan gave his speech back in '92 about it being better in its original German. There's always been this kind of undercurrent to the Republican rhetoric, to where they reach out to the white supremacists and the racists and all of these really horrible people. Trump was just the guy who said, no, come on, come out in public, come out from behind the curtain. Yeah, come out of the woods, come on with us. We're going to say it out loud. But the Republicans have been stoking that for a very long time.
You know what? I agree with you. And I believe that the NRA has been stoking the extremists for many, many years, for 4 decades. They've been building up their base of support, which ended up being the base of support for Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, because again, when you come back to talking about any bit of sanity, and I get this all the time from people, oh, you're just a gun grabber. No, I actually own one myself. I'm not a gun grabber. I just want some sanity. It's way too easy. It's way too easy to buy a gun in this country. It's easier to buy a gun than it is to buy a car or a house. That seems kind of silly to me.
It is. It's silly and it's dangerous, and that's why more than 40,000 Americans are killed every single year. And it's unnecessary, and it's preventable, and it's time for Joe Biden to make it a priority,
right?
For his administration, and work with Congress and to pass some of the sensible gun laws that the majority of Americans want and support.
Which is where I wanted to go to next. I guess more than 300 organizations have signed on to a letter, I guess, to ask actually demand the administration make this a central component of their future here. Tell me a little bit about it, if you would.
Yeah, sure. So, we supported Joe Biden for president in November because he had put forth one of the strongest gun violence prevention platform in modern history.
And he wasn't Donald Trump.
Yes, and he wasn't Donald Trump. And Donald Trump was with the NRA, and we need someone that has, beaten the NRA multiple times to be in the White House, to lead the effort to end gun violence. And there are many crises in this country right now, but gun violence is one of them. So we worked with Guns Down America, Survivors Empowered, and other organizations, and acquired signatures from 300 families and survivors who have been directly impacted by gun violence, to urge Joe Biden and his administration to make gun violence prevention a priority, because it is a public health crisis at this point in time. Gun sales have surged, and gun deaths have surged as well during the pandemic.
So what are you asking for the administration to do? So maybe calm down, because I can now some of my gun nut friends, some of my ammo-sexual friends, they are now getting all tense because she's talking about something about guns. They're going to take them. What are you suggesting? What is it that you're looking for the Biden administration to do, so that when the legislation or when something comes out, they can already be prepared for it? So what is it that you're asking for?
Well, we want President Biden to declare gun violence a public health emergency, and make sure that all agencies in government prioritize gun violence in their everyday work that they do. And then we want legislative changes. That includes universal background checks for guns and ammunition, banning weapons of war, and holding the gun industry accountable for bad practices, marketing practices, et cetera. And just passing some other sensible laws to make sure that we can keep everyone safe, including gun owners.
So what I didn't hear you say, and it might be in the fine print. Maybe you can help me if I don't see fine print really well anymore. When are they going to start knocking on my door, kicking in my door, taking my gun?
Well, if Obama couldn't do that, and they said that Obama was coming for their guns,
Yeah, well.
and that didn't happen, they in fact sold more guns, they being the NRA and the gun industry, sold more guns than ever before under the Obama administration, despite the fact that they were pushing out the rhetoric and the fear tactics that he was going to take their guns. It didn't happen. There are 400 million civilian owned guns, and it will never happen. That's not going to happen. But we want to control who gets the guns, because people that are mentally unfit or dangerous should not have access to those guns.
Yeah, and I also there's a couple other things I'd like to see thrown in. Owning a gun is a right, absolutely, but it's also a responsibility. When bad things happen, you have to be responsible for it. And if someone steals your gun, you've got to report that. And we've let that stuff just get way too lax over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, we have to remember the communities that are most impacted by gun violence too, those in Chicago and New York City and elsewhere. So it's really important to also support those communities with funding to make sure that we can reduce the epidemic of gun violence in their communities.
So last question I've got for you then, because you brought up Chicago and you go, well, the frame is always, it's the bad guys who have guns. I got to have my arsenal because the bad guys. And when you bring up Chicago, that's like the talking point for the gun crowd is, well, they're killing each other. What do you think they're going to do to us? Is there an answer to that, do you think?
It's all fear tactics and rhetoric. I live in Sandy Hook, Connecticut, and Bridgeport is a community that's about 30 minutes from Sandy Hook. But that is the rhetoric that they've been pushing. They want us to fear brown and black people coming to our communities with their gun so that they can sell guns to us, people like me. They want me to arm up against them. They're just pushing so that they can sell more guns to everyone in this country.
I'm not so much afraid of the people in those communities as I am some of the neighbors who I know have arsenals. I'm a little afraid of them, just a little bit. But Poe, I appreciate the time and the thoughts. Thanks so much.
You're welcome, and it was great speaking to you.
Good stuff. We'll get links out on how folks can take a look at the work that Poe and her organization does, and also sign on to help out and push the administration towards doing some sane things. Let's take a quick break. Right back.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1907. That was the day that President Theodore Roosevelt signed into law an effort to get corporate money out of national politics. The law was called the Tillman Act. The act was named after its chief sponsor, Senator Benjamin Tillman of South Carolina. President Roosevelt had fallen under public criticism for taking corporate money in his 1904 run for office. After he won the race, he included the issue in his address to Congress. Teddy said, "All contributions by corporations to any political committee for any political purpose should be forbidden by law." The resulting Tillman Act covered national banks and corporations, but the act had no real enforcement provisions. Since the passage of the Tillman Act, Congress has moved to further regulate campaign financing more than 10 times. Labor union contributions were regulated for the first time during World War II. During the war, unions were strictly prohibited from direct political donations. During the 1944 election, for the first time, the CIO, the Congress of Industrial Organizations, set up a political action committee. The PAC was to support pro-labor candidates and legislation. 3 years later, however, limits on union political spending were beefed up even further by the Taft-Hartley Act. The role of corporations and unions in campaign finance continues to be a hotly contested issue. In 2010, the United States Supreme Court decided the landmark case Citizens United. Their decision ruled that money equals speech. Corporations and unions can spend as much as they want want on elections as long as they don't coordinate directly with individual campaigns. This has led to a flood of money by very wealthy donors into super PACs. More than a century after the passage of the Tillman Act, we still have not solved the question of election financing.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So yesterday we were talking about the president's executive order on Buy American. And I got to tell you, I'm thrilled, jumping for joy. But I still think there was a shot in there for Trump, in that the directive was going to be something that we were going to do with a clear directive and a coordinated effort. I still think, because look, wasn't this what Trump was running on? We're gonna bring back Buy American. We're gonna bring back American manufacturing. Good rhetoric, didn't actually do it. I'm here to share some thoughts on the executive order yesterday. I've asked our good friend Scott Paul to come talk with us. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, americanmanufacturing.org, their email or their website. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Of course, Rick. Great to be with you tonight.
So good day yesterday. I look at this executive order, the fact that we're going to put someone in charge at the Office of Budget Management, who it's going to be their job to oversee this. I think that's a good sign.
Yeah, I mean, it's in your lead up, I think you very accurately described things, is that Trump talked about this a lot. There was a lot of rhetoric. He did a couple of executive orders, but they were very process oriented. And they ended up in absolutely no change until the administration finally dropped a Buy American rule the day before it left. And of course, that made it subject to review. And in the words of the old, I think Denise Williams and Johnny Mathis song, too much, too little, too late. So Joe Biden, and I think this was great because this is obviously within his first week of being president, he also sets into place a process that would strengthen Buy America by reducing waivers, by closing loopholes, by raising thresholds. And by that, I mean, instead of Buy American meaning 50% plus one, it might be 60% or 70% or 80% or even 90 or 95% of a final product has to be made in America and its subcomponents to qualify. All of this is good. And Rick, as you point out, he's going to have someone in charge of this in the White House at the Office of Management Budget who's going to review these waivers. And not only that, they will have an arm of the Commerce Department, the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Programs, that will work to find domestic suppliers for all of this procurement. And what kind of a market are we talking about here? We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars in government procurement. And that's even before an infrastructure plan or a clean energy plan. So yes, I am excited. We have a lot to work on to get to the end of the process to make sure that there is the right personnel in place and that they're going to do this properly. But it's off to a very good start.
Yeah, they said $400 billion is what they're talking about, the number that they want to spend here. And again, you go back to this and you interject that kind of demand into an economy. There are going to be people out there, even if there aren't factories here yet, to meet that demand. There will be if you say that they have to be.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this is a very traditional arm of what economists would call industrial policy. And of course, when they talk about it, they think it's kind of a dirty word or a dirty phrase. I love it. I think it's what our government needs to be doing to build up manufacturing. It's what we've done over the course of our nation's history to do that, going back to Alexander Hamilton, who wanted to have a manufacturing base in the United States, and we had an industrial policy to get us there. So this is an industrial policy for the 21st century to make sure that instead of China making 70% of those lithium ion batteries that we're going to need for electrical vehicles, that we're making some of them here, and that we're making the electric vehicles here, and we have the supply chain here. And it does take industrial policy to do that. And procurement, this Buy American, is a big piece of that. So I think, Biden is off to a good start, and I'm glad that he listened to those economists who supported the idea that we can have a bright manufacturing future in this country with the right policies. I just want to say that I love that Biden said automation, globalization, they are a fact, but even despite automation and globalization, we can have a bright future for manufacturing workers in the United States if we have the right policies and don't give up on it.
Absolutely. And, to me, this should be one of those moments where there's overwhelming support on all sides of the aisle, because who could possibly be against, building things, as I say all the time, production for domestic consumption. But then I find the conservative AstroTurf group, Freedom Works, their head honcho came out and said that, well, it sounds nice, but, quote, at the end of the day, it's only going to raise prices, what government buys with the American taxpayer dollars. I look at that and like I said earlier, I'm not overly violent. Somebody needs to slap this guy, because what he's talking about is A, not having a manufacturing base, and B, not having those jobs that are going to continue to build on our economy. There's so much wrong with that statement.
There's a lot wrong. Maybe slap him academically, but I would also take him on a trip to the Bay Bridge in San Francisco, where Arnold Schwarzenegger made a deal with the Chinese government because they would save California a lot of money to do this. It ended up being over budget. It cost jobs in the United States, wasn't a good deal for California taxpayers, and it had a lot of structural issues. You may get, it's like that cheap tool that you get from China. Yeah, you might, wow, I saved $5 on that hammer. And then after 3 usages, it breaks. So ultimately, you're not going to be in a better situation. And that's kind of the Freedom Works approach on this. But honestly, even Republicans, thankfully, aren't listening to Freedom Works. The overwhelming majority of elected Republicans who are in the House and the Senate also think Buy America, Buy American is a great idea. And I doubt if they'll want to give Joe Biden credit for doing a lot of this, but I have to imagine that they're going to support these policies as we move forward.
I don't care if they give Joe Biden credit for it. I don't think Joe Biden cares if he gets credit for it. I think it has to get done.
Yeah, I agree. And my thing about this, Rick, is that it is good to have these procurement policies in place that Buy American, that when we are expending these public dollars, these tax dollars on goods and services that are being purchased by the federal government or money that's being granted to states to build roads or bridges or other types of infrastructure, that American workers, American factories have the first shot at this. And not only that, they have a preference in the bidding, because that means there is money recirculated in our economy. And it's especially important if we are contemplating trillions of dollars of investments as we move ahead in clean energy, in infrastructure. We don't simply want to trade foreign oil for Chinese solar panels. We want to make sure that our future is built right here in the United States.
Now, that is such an excellent point. But, one of the first things I heard is, well, he just made, solar panels much more expensive. And, he's done all these horrible things. And I'm going, we need to make these things here so that we're not dependent on China for these things. Because haven't you been paying attention during this thing we've been going through, this whole pandemic thing, where we can't seem to get any N95 masks? We can't seem to get gowns for our first responders. We can't seem to get the things that we need because they're made somewhere else.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Part of this is obviously about supporting the American worker. Part of this is about making sure that we are secure as a nation with economic security, health security, national security. And so it is in no one's interest to see 70% of the lithium-ion batteries made in the world come from China and into our market. That gives China outsized influence. It makes no sense for the PPEs or certain types of medicines for us to be dependent on China. That gives the Chinese government way too much influence and capacity to do harm. Same goes for rare earth minerals, all those kind of weird minerals that are in your smartphone and your computer and the stuff that I'm using right now. It makes no sense to let China have the market on that. And they may not, look, I hope that we don't have a Cold War. I certainly don't want a a shooting war, but we do have to understand, and I think the Biden administration understands this, that they are a strategic competitor. And so it makes sense for us to have some domestic capacity to do this. And that's how the procurement policies help. So those cost arguments, they don't hold water at all. We've had Buy America, Buy American policies on the books. Even Reagan supported increasing them. So come on, conservatives, give Joe Biden a break here.
Yeah, and give the country a break. I mean, the sad reality is it. And your organization wrote the definitive book on this, along with former Pennsylvania former Governor Tom Ridge, on all of the things that our military needs that we no longer build here, we no longer make. And you're just flipping through, looking, just screws, from anywhere from fasteners to the magnets that go in the front of the smart bombs. We don't make that stuff anymore. So if we ever do get into that shooting war that neither of us want, I don't think we're going to be able to go, time out. Can you send us some of that stuff so we can kill you with it? I don't think that's going to happen.
No, it's just, again, it's smart from a national security perspective. It's smart from a jobs perspective. It is a classic industrial policy. Other countries around the world do this. They obviously don't call it Buy American, but they have similar policies. And if we want to maintain our position in the world and our strength and be able to project our values and be able to have a brighter future for our middle class, we need to have these policies as well. At the very least, we can make sure that our tax dollars, our own tax dollars, are going to invest in American innovation, in American production, in American wages, in American workers.
I'm right there with you. Now obviously, I think Trump was right. China is a major problem. We have the new defense secretary, Lloyd Austin, who during his confirmation hearing said that China presents the most significant threat going forward because China is ascending. They're growing, they're becoming more muscular, and their actions are becoming more muscular. Is he right?
Yeah, unfortunately, he is right. And again, I don't say this as someone who wants to get us into more conflict or spend more money on defense, rather the opposite. But I do think that we need to fully understand and appreciate what Beijing and the Chinese Communist Party is doing. And believe me, they don't speak for all the Chinese. They don't even speak for half the Chinese. They speak for a very small portion of China. But unfortunately, they rule the country and they rule it with an iron fist. And that has negative consequences within China, particularly to the Uyghur population, the Muslim population, where there are literally concentration camps and where the last administration determined there was a genocide, Hong Kong and democracy, but it also projects around the world. And their economic policies actually come at the expense of other countries like the United States. And so we do, I think, have to take this strategic threat very seriously. And I think the White House is right. And Rick, to your point, not only Secretary Austin, but the Commerce Secretary Raimondo, her hearing today, or Janet Yellen, they all talked about China and being willing to use the tools that we have to both defend the United States and our interest and make sure that we're holding China accountable and making sure they're honoring the commitments that they've made to the United States specifically and to their global commitments as well. And so I don't think that, I think that Biden may talk about this in a different way than Trump did, certainly, but I think that their policy in many ways will be more muscular than the Trump administration's.
Now, it was reported that he also said of the 2018 National Defense Strategy published by the Trump administration that China and Russia present serious threats, and that for the most part they're still on the same track with this 2018 National Defense Strategy. So this fear that Joe Biden was going to be this China's president, that he was going to surrender. That's not accurate.
No, and I tell you what, I got so upset when conservatives would say Beijing Biden or something like that. I'm like, give me a break here. I mean, Joe Biden, from a foreign policy perspective, may have missed China early, but I think after meeting with Xi Jinping, and he called him a thug, a couple of years ago, kind of understood what was going on. Unlike Trump, he never made any clothes or furniture with the Trump brand on it from China. He didn't have business dealings, on the scale of billions of dollars like Trump did. So I thought this was ridiculous. It's not like he's going to appease China or let it off the hook. And I think Biden is smart enough. He surrounded himself with really bright people. I think they do understand this threat, and they do understand that at the end of the Obama administration, they gave China too much slack. And that's not a mistake that's going to be repeated. And he's going to find a lot of support on Capitol Hill for that position as well among Democrats and Republicans. You think Nancy Pelosi, you think Adam Schiff. I think they both view China as a strategic competitor, or you think some of the Republicans like Marco Rubio or these guys as well. So I think there is a broad consensus that we need to take this challenge quite seriously.
Now, what I'm hopeful for is because Joe Biden does have good relationships with foreign leaders. In fact, virtually every foreign leader kind of breathed a sigh of relief when Trump was leaving the door. I'm hoping that, again, as we've talked in the past, that Biden uses those alliances. We strengthen the global community, and then that's how you bring China into some bit of place. Not by having heated rhetoric, not with threats, but by actually a coordinated effort globally.
Yeah, I completely agree, and there's evidence to support that as well. I think back, and no one's going to remember this, but in the aftermath of the Great Recession, China was manipulating its currency, and our Treasury Department under Obama was getting upset about it. They enlisted allies to say to China that we are going to publicly shame you unless you stop this. And everybody stopped short of naming China a currency manipulator. But that type of coordinated effort with allies got China to stop currency manipulation for multiple years. And it shows that if you have the power of the alliance and you have a sharp message and clear objectives, that you are going to be able to influence Beijing's behavior. And we are stronger together rather than going it alone.
Yeah, I'm like I said yesterday, I'm looking forward to moving forward on the Buy American part. I'm looking forward to somehow reuniting the globe and getting things somewhat on track. And not having to worry about what kind of crazy tweets are coming out at 3 o'clock in the morning. Just my thoughts. But Scott, I appreciate the time. Always great talking to you, my friend.
You bet, Rick. Keep up the great work.
Good stuff. Our good friend Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. Make sure you check out their website, allianceforamericanmanufacturing.org, americanmanufacturing.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can get that. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1897, and the founding charter of the Amalgamated Meat Cutters Union was formed out of the merger of 7 other unions. What made the meat cutters unique for its time was that it included both skilled, or craft labor, and unskilled, or industrial workers. Organizing this complex workforce was made even more difficult because of the diversity of skills and ethnic makeup of the laborers that made up the stockyards. From the Civil War until the 1920s, the stockyards on Chicago's South Side were the heart of the meatpacking industry. Railways from Chicago brought meat raised on Midwestern grazing lands and farms to East Coast markets. In 1880, the Chicago stockyards processed 20 million cows and pigs. The workers who processed these animals worked in deplorable and unsafe conditions for low wages. In 1904, the Amalgamated Meat Cutters Union led a major strike in the stockyards of Chicago. Author Upton Sinclair included the strike in his famous novel, The Jungle. The strike was broken, in part by management bringing in scab labor. African Americans were among that scab labor. Black workers had been largely excluded from union leadership in the yards. At the time, black workers also were often organized into segregated locals, especially in the skilled trades. The failure of the 1904 strike evidenced the importance of organizing workers across racial and ethnic lines. It was an example of the long-standing tactic by management to attempt to divide workers by race and ethnicity, a tactic that continues to this day, highlighting the labor call of United We Bargain, Divided We Beg. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at laborhistoryin2.
In a world that's clogged and choking with a massive overdose of plastic trash, you will be heartened to learn that governments and industries are teaming up to respond forcefully to this planetary crisis. Unfortunately, their response has been to engage in a global race to make more plastic stuff and to force poor countries to become dumping grounds for plastic garbage. Leading this Kafkaesque greed fest are such infamous plunderers and polluters as ExxonMobil, Chevron, Shell, and other petrochemical profiteers. With fossil fuel profits crashing, the giants are rushing to convert more of their oversupply of oil into plastic. But where to send the monstrous volumes of waste that will result? The industry's chief lobbyist outfit, the American Chemistry Council, looked around last year and suddenly shouted, "Eureka! There's Africa!" In particular, they're targeting Kenya to become a plastics hub for global trade in waste. However, Kenyans have an influential community of environmental activists who've enacted some of the world's toughest bans on plastic pollution. To bypass this inconvenient local opposition, the dumpers are resorting to an old corporate power play, free trade. Their lobbyists are pushing an autocratic trade agreement that would ban Kenyan officials from passing their own laws or rules that interfere with trade in plastic waste. Trying to hide their ugliness, the plastic profiteers created a PR front group called Alliance to End Public Waste. But hello, it's not public waste. Exxon and other funders of the alliance make, promote, and profit from the mountains of destructive trash they now demand we clean up. This is Jim Hightower saying the real problem is not waste, but plastic itself. Rather than subsidizing more of the stuff, we should seek out and encourage people who are developing real solutions and alternatives.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said from the beginning, I don't think you're going to hear. I don't think Trump's going to be impeached. I don't think he's going to be convicted. He's already been impeached a second time, and I think a second time you're going to see the Republicans let him get off the hook. There is some talk, however, of possibly moving towards something of a censure. I don't see that happening either. But good on Tim Kaine and Susan Collins for trying. But we'll see where it's going to play out. It's always fun and interesting to watch how Democrats shoot themselves in the toes. And here to share some thoughts on, which toes they get to keep this time around, I've asked our good friend Harvey Kaye to come talk with us. Harvey's an author and professor of democracy at the University of Green Bay, Wisconsin. One of his fabulous books, The Four Freedoms, one of my favorites. Harvey, thanks for taking time for us.
Always a pleasure for you, Rick. Thanks.
So, as I said at the beginning, I fear that the Democrats have already shot themselves in the foot because they've taken so long in this. This should have been done. This should have been done already.
Yeah. Well, Donald should have been done much earlier on, of course, but go ahead. Sorry.
Well, now you've got all these. You had all but one Republican, let him off the hook the last time. I guess now all but five have pushed back on Rand Paul's point of order to have it set aside. So this is a glaring bit of going, he's going to get off of this.
It's amazing. So first McConnell said, he essentially incited the events. Now he's not so sure they should even go ahead with this whole trial. Rand Paul, who's to my mind a yo-yo, frankly, he's leading the opposition, and then he goes down onto the floor of the Senate without a mask on. I mean, these people they're shameful. I mean, they're just awful. These Republicans are awful. And the tragedy is that the Democrats just never seem to get their act together to effectively either bring an end to the Trump administration or literally drive these Republicans to the wall.
Yeah, I mean, but at the end of this, and I got to be honest, that my fear has been that Democrats will do what they've done in the past and not be able to drive the car. And when they finally get the engine started, they drive it into a ditch. Because there's a lot that needs to be done. And at the beginning, I gave Schumer a little bit of credit for not giving up on the rules of the Senate and giving McConnell some power. I'm thrilled about that. So I have some guarded optimism because I'm trying not to slip my wrists at this point, Harvey.
Look, this whole thing about I think the really big question is ending the filibuster, and McConnell backed off, demanding that they make some kind of pledge not to do it because he discovered that Manchin and Sinema are unlikely to go along with the idea of ending the filibuster. I mean, are they so uncreative that they can't buy off two of their maverick senators? I mean, there's usually a way that you can work out a great deal. So, for example, Manchin's already said he favors, I think he actually made a remark to the effect of a $4 trillion infrastructure, program. And, that would really benefit West Virginia a lot. So can't Biden and Schumer and Pelosi work out a great deal that, they're going to raise everyone's income in West Virginia? I mean, there's got to be ways you can do this. The Democrats just utterly disappoint. I'm sorry, they just utterly disappoint me over and over again. Undeniably, however, the pandemic is the first issue. And if they run into trouble in trying to get more aid for Americans, then I don't know what to expect in the upcoming months at all.
Now, Schumer did say that everything's on the table and they may go right to budget reconciliation, I guess is how they would move this.
Yes.
And it's my view he should go to try and get a quarterly budget a quarterly vehicle like this so you can do it more than once a year.
Right.
But at the end of this, he's got that's the ultimate need right there. Now on the filibuster front, I've got a compromise. I'm all in favor of keeping the filibuster as long as you're willing to stand out there and hold the floor. This idea of you secretly putting a filibuster on something and then it just dying is ridiculous. If you want to go all Jesse Helm or Strom Thurmond, you want to go all Strom Thurmond and spend 24 hours reading the phone book, God bless you. But then when you're done, when you can't hold it anymore and you got to run to the John, then we vote on the damn thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. And I've been thinking about something along those lines as well. Most Americans mistakenly think the filibuster goes back to the time of the almost the Continental Congress. But in fact, it's really an innovation of the post-World War II period. So, yeah, let's go back. Let's go back to what is that? Was that film Mr. Smith Goes to Washington? Yep. Something like that?
Yeah.
Let them all pretend to be Jimmy Stewart in the Senate.
No, because as I've been saying, a couple of things. One, this goes back to the Jim Crow era. But two, more importantly, I think of all of the really decent legislation that could have gotten through, all of the labor legislation that could have moved our country forward, that didn't because, go back to the Clinton era. You had Bob Dole who filibustered the strike replacement bill. Well, the only damn reason I voted for Bill Clinton. And Bob Dole was able to single-handedly stop that himself.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff has to stop.
Okay, so I've got a plan. As long as you've got your filibuster plan,
let's hear
it. I think the first priority beyond the pandemic. I mean, if you think about it in the old FDR terms, the pandemic effort will be the relief effort. The next things we need are reconstruction, reform, and recovery. And here's how I think it ought to be pursued. I think that the Biden administration really ought to go all out with the Democrats in the House and the Senate, especially with Bernie in the chair of the Senate Budget Committee, in favor of a massive, truly massive public works initiative. Okay. Now, the public works initiative, they should put into it something that they can come back to if the Republicans balk too much. And that is anyone involved in this massive public works initiative, whether they're public employees or under private contract, is guaranteed health care, period. That's first. The second thing is they're guaranteed collective bargaining rights. Let that be, if you like, the first effort to move in favor of the kinds of things you and I want to see. And then if it gets, suppressed or pushed out of the bill before it gets enacted, then that's when Biden walks in and really uses the executive order. He can use the executive order to guarantee that anyone involved in the public initiative must have collective bargaining rights, and just make that as part of any federal contract. So I think there are ways to move ahead, and I think because of the fact that it would be a budget question, they could easily also use budget reconciliation for that.
No, it doesn't sound like a horrible idea. Maybe that $4 trillion infrastructure plan that Manchin wants, it could be a big part of that.
Right, and I'll add to that something that I think I've mentioned to you before, off the air, and that is that kind of initiative will provide jobs for everyone who wants one. And that will also bring together inside of the project folks who probably, not only voted for Biden himself, but voted as Republicans for Trump. Not the kind of people who stormed the Capitol building, okay? But working people who voted Republican.
Yep.
And I think back to the 30s with Roosevelt and the way we transcended the crisis of the 30s, besides the politics and economics of it, was that Americans came together inside of Civilian Conservation Corps, Works Progress Administration, and the gigantic initiatives of the Public Works Administration. And that's the kind of thing we have to pursue, because we have to figure out a way not only to reconcile budgets, we have to reconcile the American people to recognize that they're Americans first.
Absolutely.
Not to be confused with America first, please.
Exactly.
Definitely.
But I've been saying this kind of stuff for years now. I'm somebody, and I've taken heat for it, who says that we shouldn't be giving out food stamps. We shouldn't be giving out welfare. There should be none of that. There should be jobs programs. If the private sector can't, or more likely won't, create enough good paying jobs where people are going to be able to support themselves, that's where the public sector has to step in, and with the kind of jobs that you're talking about. Every community needs something. Every community has things that need to be rebuilt, people that need to be serviced. We could create those jobs and make them good, family sustaining, living wage jobs, not the kind of poverty jobs that the private sector keeps trying to shove down our throats. This way we would do a couple of things. Everybody would be able to have a job. Everyone would have the dignity of work. They'd be able to support themselves, and we wouldn't be ripped apart by pointing fingers and going, well, there's a welfare queen over there. We'd end all that nonsense.
Right. Oh, as a matter of fact, I left off the third key ingredient into this public works initiative. I'm glad you reminded me, essentially. And that is setting the minimum wage inside of this grand endeavor. I know they announced today $15 by 2025. I was tweeting. People called me crazy. I think there are others who've been saying similar kinds of things. 25 and 25. That is, we shoot for a $25 minimum wage in 2025. And more immediately, when he signs into law this grand public works initiative, immediately anyone involved in that gets a $15 minimum wage right now, immediately.
So let me ask you obviously the questions are going to come with that. What do you do with the people who are making, $16, $17 an hour now? Because the fear has always been not just raising the people at the bottom, but it's that ripple effect all the way up. The fear is that you're going to create mass inflation and that you're going to need a wheelbarrow full of cash to buy a loaf of bread.
Well, you know what? That's where Medicare for All comes in. Make everybody happy and healthy.
No, I'm with you.
I'm serious. I'm serious. I think the Democrats have walked into a crisis, and that the only way out of the crisis is that they embrace the principles that were in the Biden platform, even if the policies were not. Okay, there was reference to universal health care. Okay, I don't see any way to avoid that. Look, I mean, the idea of universal health care back in 1944, 85% of Americans wanted it. At the end of the war, there were serious initiatives and bills that became law that essentially were pushing for a full employment economy. Everyone talks about the Council of Economic Advisors because they look to see who's been appointed to it. The Council of Economic Advisors' original mission was a full employment economy. It's time we remember who we are, we remember what we've done, And the Democrats, even if they're not prepared to go all the way, let them at least endorse the principle. Endorse the principle of universal health care by way of a sense of the Senate vote. And look, I'm not arguing for what Jimmy Dore was proposing. I'm arguing for the stronger voices in the Senate, such as Bernie Sanders, who has already said he's going to be floating a number of bills, pushing a number of things through the Budget Committee that are not necessarily immediately endorsed by Joe Biden, but he's going to try to push him.
Yeah, I have no idea what Jimmy Dore said.
Okay, sorry. He was pushing that. He was demanding.
I don't even know who Jimmy Dore is, but
just as well. He's a podcaster and YouTuber who's got a huge audience, and he was targeting the squad that somehow they should demand that Pelosi call for a vote on Medicare for all in the House, and that if she failed to do it, that they push for her removal from the speakership. But of course, it was idiotic because of the fact that he was going after the most essential voices in the progressive movement inside of Congress. I mean, I don't want to go any further than that. It was.
Yeah, you've already wasted enough time for it. Thanks for bringing that up.
Right.
So now you talked about the first two. Go through the second two parts of your plan.
Well, no. In fact, so the point was that if you push this proposal, this grand public works project, then, as I was saying, you've got to be in a position that Biden is prepared by way of an executive order. Okay, I'm repeating myself a bit, but the whole point is that by way of an executive order, he's going to guarantee that anyone involved in the public works initiatives has that at least immediately a $15 minimum wage, is guaranteed a healthcare program, healthcare coverage, and also collective bargaining rights. And by the way, the only way to transcend all of this, and I've been saying this forever, is by way of reinvigorating and strengthening collective bargaining and labor unions. You know, I don't think people quite realize that the making of democracy in America was often a struggle. One, that the making of a decent American standard of living was by way of the labor movement. You know, the Great Depression of 1929, 1930, the early 1930s, was pretty much diagnosed as a problem of purchasing power because big business was making huge profits, but Americans could not afford to buy things. And similarly, we're entering into a phase now where our economy may well be all the more in trouble because there are going to be too many people who don't even have jobs to go back to.
Right.
We're going to have to create jobs. And I don't mean make work jobs. I'm talking about transformational jobs, nation building jobs that bring in healthcare to the workers, that bring in the minimum wage, that bring in collective bargaining rights. I mean, that's the project.
Yeah, so let me ask you this, because you keep bringing up collective bargaining rights, but you keep giving away everything that you collectively bargain over. We're going to have this high wage. Everyone's going to have health care. We're going to put all these things in. So what does collective bargaining do then? I mean, if we're in an era now where
you asked me about folks making $16 and $17.
Okay.
They're going to demand higher wages. Look,
Okay.
We're going into a year with a lot of contracts coming up. We're going to see, for the first time in many years, okay, we're going to see serious strikes throughout the American economy.
we are.
Okay, and what we definitely need to do is make sure that the original initiatives, the original intention behind the National Labor Relations Board, which was to place the government solidly behind workers' efforts to organize and bargain collectively, that's renewed. Okay, we've got, in essence, I say it's time to get rid of the Taft-Hartley Act of 1947.
No, I say that all the time. That's the minimum. I'll go back to the original intent of the NLRA, which doesn't give one single right to any employer. It gives all the rights to employees because they understood that the employers had all the rights. And this just kind of gave some balance to the equation. And it came about because of as you know as well as anybody, because of all the massive strikes that were going on. It was about industrial peace. It was about, hey, let's not have these bloody wars that go on in our backyard. Let's give a way to fix this. And maybe we got to go back to that.
Yeah, the term they used for that in the 1930s went back, in fact, I think into the 19-teens, but really became the law of the land with the NLRA is industrial democracy. industrial democracy. More, I mean, to my mind, what progressives need to do is start using the words social democracy and industrial democracy. Start cultivating the narrative, start reminding Americans of the past.
No, there are most certainly lessons to be learned. Now, again, you had four pillars that you had moved on. I guess the four R's. You didn't get to.
Oh, sorry. Right. Thank you. Right. I misunderstood you when you said go back to the other two.
I wanted to go back to the last two because you hit the first two.
Okay. So relief. Okay. And the next one had to do with reconstruction, but the reconstruction would include decidedly real initiatives of reform, collective bargaining, right back in there for workers. That's a major reform. You and I both know that. Look, again, I go back to the 30s. What were the two major reforms of the 1930s? National Labor Relations Act and the Social Security Act. In some fashion, we have to begin it. Look, even if we're not going to go Medicare for all right away, we've got to figure out a way to move it along. So I've been arguing in a number of venues that we need Medicare for all children. Guaranteed universal health care for all children. And as they get older, they'll vote for Medicare for all. Okay?
Well, isn't that kind of where we almost are now with Medicaid? What is it? I think half of all the children in the country are born thanks to Medicaid.
Well, I don't want it to be Medicaid. I want it to be a national health care program that they're covered. I don't want it to be that you have to be poor to be covered. Okay? That's basically it. And then on top of that, there are other kinds of things. We need to strengthen the Voting Rights Act. Okay, definitely need to strengthen the Voting Rights Act. In fact, we could go on and on, but basically, to my mind, first and foremost is the rights of labor, and period.
So
then, by the way, and notice I put recovery as the last of the R's, and I say that because in the 1930s, the way to recovery was through relief, reconstruction, and reform, and recovery will be a part of that.
So I guess now we got to go back to the beginning. Joe Biden began his administration last week. Give me really quick kind of your view on how those first couple of days rolled out.
Well, it's true. In one sense, I was immediately disappointed by the speech.
Yes,
I know everyone talked about it, unity. Frankly, I thought it was a very mediocre speech. He hit some points. In fact, the first couple of hundred words of the speech, and the way he presented them, I actually thought we were going to be in for a great radio show. For a brief moment, he sounded like the beginning of I don't expect people to know who it was, but of a Norman Corwin radio production of the late 1930s and 1940s. Fabulous radio, because there was something in his voice. It was strong, and he was ready to go. The problem was that he didn't go. It became a repetition of the unity theme without telling us how we're going to create that unity. And now to explain to you what I mean. Yes, there was the reference to Lincoln, all well and good. It was something of a misrepresentation. Lincoln faced a civil war, and he fought a damn good civil war. We're not looking to do that right now, okay? But I was surprised, given the crisis we face and the times he had dropped the three letters FDR in the past year, that perhaps he should have been talking about FDR and how we might well emulate the New Deal and, again, the things I was talking about a little while ago in terms of labor. And moreover, there was no reference to labor. Extremely disappointing, okay? So unity was talked about, but not solidarity. And then the last thing that disappointed me, again, when I base it on the Roosevelt years, is the fact he didn't tell us how we're going to go beyond confronting the pandemic. Again, the kinds of things we were talking about. But then in the course of the 24 hours, in fact, even as he was giving that speech, I think they had already issued the ultimatum to that Peter Robb, that's his name, right? Who was the senior counsel at the National Labor Relations Board, a real corporate hack, a guy who was involved in Ronald Reagan's firing of the Patco workers back in 1981. And by the way, this is the 40th anniversary of that confrontation and that strike and those firings.
August 4th.
And it was wonderful to find out that they told them, resign by 5 o'clock or we're going to fire you. Well, that told me something. That told me that somewhere in that Biden administration, they've got labor in their minds, and that was a good sign. And then if you like, the cherry on top was the story that appeared and it was a fairly lengthy story in the Washington Post, that Biden as we would hope, redecorated, that's the way to put it, the Oval Office. And he had busts of prominent figures of the past, many of them progressives, but most significantly, especially in light of the fact that there was no reference to FDR in the speech, there's now a prominently displayed portrait of FDR, and apparently displayed in such a way or hung in such a way that everyone in the room, especially the man who sits in the desk, the command desk, sees that portrait every single day. So I'm hoping maybe, just maybe, Biden will have FDR whispering in his ear.
That is the hope. But here's the thing: I don't beat him up for not mentioning FDR, because outside of you and a handful of others, this generation's not really learned that history. So I think that he's going to be his own guy. But if FDR is whispering in his ear, which would not be a bad thing to happen, maybe we get some good stuff out of it.
Well, let me put it this way. If you can mention Lincoln, who's the greatest president of the 19th century, you make a terrible mistake if you don't mention FDR, who was the greatest president of the 20th.
Excellent point. Last question I've got for you. Clearly, long way to go. Are we okay with? I mean, because you've been really, really down so far on the Biden administration. Are we hopeful at this point that maybe things are going to go in a good direction, or is this all bad?
Okay, here's what I say. I've never used the word optimistic in this
You never
moment.
have.
Okay, but I can tell you I am still hopeful.
Hopeful.
I am hopeful. And I'll tell you what really gives me the most hope. And I can't tell you how thrilled I am that Bernie is the chair of the Senate Budget Committee. That to me is so important. And so therefore, as chair of the Senate Budget Committee, he's not going to let things slide.
There you go.
Slide.
Good stuff. Harvey, as always, I appreciate the conversation. Good stuff, my friend.
Thank you, Rick. Always great to see you.
You too. Our good friend Harvey Kaye. Make sure you check out his book, The Four Freedoms. If you don't know about FDR, that will teach you. That will be a good start. We'll get links out on how you can take a look at that. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people from the top.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
He has 17 executive orders really wiping away much of what President Trump did.
President Biden moves to undo even more of Trump's attacks on the environment.
The federal government also owns an enormous fleet of vehicles.
And will use the power of the government purse to boost electric vehicles. Plus, court strikes fatal blow to Trump's polluting power plant rule.
All of those blows, fatal and otherwise, straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
This back and forth, this must be so weird for other countries. Because under Obama, America celebrated the Paris Accords. But then under Trump, it was like, F the Paris Accords! Let the planet burn! And then now under Biden, it's like, all right, guys, I'm back in the Paris Accords. Sorry, yeah, and I'm also back on my meds. Sorry about that.
Yeah, we are sorry. And back on our meds. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I don't know how long it's going to take to undo all that Donald Trump did to the environment in the last 4 years, but we're off to a good start.
Oh, definitely. The Biden administration is moving swiftly on that monumental task of undoing the damage the Trump administration inflicted on the environment, while also launching Biden's whole-of-government approach to combating man-made climate change. Here is a partial list. The Biden administration announced a temporary pause on all new oil, gas, and coal leasing for U.S. lands and waters. It does not affect existing leases, but is a first step to proposing a total ban on fossil fuel leases on the public's lands. The temporary suspension also applies to new mining approvals and land swaps, including that transfer of lands in Arizona that are held sacred by Native Americans to a mining company. That is now on hold.
Good.
Biden rescinded Trump's 2019 declaration of a national emergency at the southern border with Mexico, which halts further construction of Trump's border wall that has already damaged the fragile desert environment.
Good again.
Biden also reinstated enacted the Obama-era federal flood standard, which mandates that the design and construction of federally funded infrastructure must account for future sea level rise, increased flood risks, and other accelerating climate impacts.
Good, and good.
Biden's Environmental Protection Agency has asked the Department of Justice to pause its defense of Trump-era environmental rollbacks in court. The EPA is relaunching staff trainings on environmental justice and environmental racism. On Monday, as part of his Buy America plan, Biden announced he will direct the formidable purchasing power of the federal government, about $600 billion a year in funding, to buy only American-made products and materials while investing in modernizing infrastructure and climate solutions. And that includes replacing the entire U.S. government's vehicle fleet.
The federal government also owns an enormous fleet of vehicles, which we're going to replace with clean electric vehicles made right here in America by American workers, creating millions of auto worker jobs in clean energy and vehicles that are net zero emissions. And together, this will be the largest mobilization of public investment in procurement, infrastructure, and R&D since World War II.
Wow, that's huge. That's a lot of cars if he's going to replace the entire fleet. How many are we talking about here?
We are talking about 650,000 vehicles. Biden will also close loopholes that had previously allowed car makers to claim their vehicles are American-made, even if only a few parts were made in the U.S.
So a lot of electric cars are going to be made by government fiat.
Yep. Biden is also hiring climate experts for top positions in every cabinet-level agency. He'll unveil a second round of climate-related executive orders later in the week. Meanwhile, very huge, very good news. A federal court has struck down one of Trump's most consequential climate rollbacks. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals vacated the Trump administration's replacement of President Obama's landmark Clean Power Plan, the first-ever standards to reduce carbon emissions from power plants. The Trump replacement rule was so weak that the Trump administration admitted it would actually increase pollution and could cause as many as 1,400 additional premature deaths every year.
Of course, that's why he liked it.
The court said that the Trump administration, quote, fundamentally misconceived the law. And crucially, it also reaffirmed the EPA's authority to craft climate regulations for a range of sources. The ruling gives the Biden administration a clean slate to craft new rules to control greenhouse gas emissions from power plants and meet Biden's target of 100% clean electricity by 2035. Finally, auto industry experts say electric vehicles are close to the tipping point of rapid mass adoption thanks to the plummeting cost of batteries. German car maker Audi became the latest manufacturer to announce it is ending production of internal combustion versions of its most popular car models, including plug-in hybrids, and will focus instead on going full electric. No point planning to build a car that you aren't going to be able to sell.
I told you to get rid of those internal combustion cars long ago. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it looks like the first Trumpkin to get a job is going to be Larry Kudlow. Kudlow, Trump's National Economic Council advisor, actually the director. He's got a gig with Fox Business. Anybody surprised by he went back to Fox? Not a bit. Evidently later in the year, Kudlow will begin his own business show. I got to think he's going to be one of the only to get a job out of the Trump administration, but we'll see. Anyway, yesterday, big news. Rob Portman, senator from Ohio, following the path of our senator here in Pennsylvania, Pat Toomey, not going to seek re-election in 2020. And you know, I don't blame him, to be honest. Things have gotten really crazy, but it's going to open up the doors to some interesting people. And here to share some thoughts on maybe who's going to be racing out and who's going to be jockeying for position in what is going to be, I'm sure, a heavily funded race. I've asked our good friend David Pepper to come talk with us. David is the former chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party. He's the guy who would know all the pieces on the board. David, thanks for taking time for us.
Good to be with you.
So not going to have Rob Portman to kick around anymore, you're not?
Well, you know what? I hate to say it. He was one of these guys today who wouldn't vote to move forward on impeachment. So there was a moment where people thought maybe this would liberate him to actually do the right thing. And today showed that it might be 2 painful years. At least Toomey voted the right way on that one. And Portman, what else is it going to take? He doesn't now have to even worry about re-election, and he still can't find a backbone. So we may have to kick him around a little more.
Yeah.
And it's just frustrating for us here.
Yeah, it's one of those things.
He's a guy who knows better, and that's why one reason why people have been so frustrated in Ohio. He knows better. He's just been a coward for 4 straight years.
No, my friend Bob Ney, who we had on yesterday, said that there's no way he's running for governor. He's leaving. He's a guy who doesn't like conflict. That the environment for him is he's just done with it. So do we end up getting somebody who thrives on conflict, and we end up with someone a Ted Cruz kind of character coming out of Ohio? Are there any of those lining up?
Yeah, we're going to see. It'll be a really interesting race because I think on the Democratic side you'll see some different names, and you'll have some outsiders and insiders. We could talk about them. But on the Republican side, especially if Donald Trump does what he's saying, which is use 22 as a way to show how strong he is, I think you're going to have a real ideological battle between the Jim Jordans and a few like him, the far to the right, living in gerrymandered districts, true, big lie believers on the election, unabashed about it, versus, the older Rob Portman style, trying to be more moderate, not knowing what to do with this new crazy party. Like the lieutenant governor of the state is named John Husted. He could do that. Frank LaRose, the Secretary of State. So I think this could, now in the past, just to be clear, when there's been a showdown between the establishment wing and the Tea Party wing, when that's what it was called, the establishment always won here, just like John Kasich won the primary against Trump here. But 22 might be the year where that switches over because you saw how Trump did in Ohio. And I imagine that it depends on who's in the race and who takes votes from whom. But I think this could be the year where you see the far right finally overtake the more establishment Republicans in Ohio.
And how does that then bode, do you think, for the race as a whole? Do some of those establishment Republicans go, no, we can't go crazy, we're going to vote for the Democrat, or do they hold their nose and vote for crazy?
I think some of them move, but I do worry that Democrat, I'm good friends with Jack Conway of Kentucky. He ran for governor there. And Senate. And I'll never forget when this crazy guy Rand Paul won the primary, we thought, wonderful, he's too crazy, he'll never win. Look what happened. So, I think the Democrats need to be very careful. Like if they get a candidate that can fire up Trump turnout, you could get someone like Jim Jordan to win. You can't take anything for granted. And you might have a case where a moderate will be the one who has poor turnout because Trump voters stay home. So, I don't say that to be negative. I think these races are winnable. If you look at 18 in Ohio, Sherrod won by 7. We lost the governor's race by under 4. But I also think you also want to be real careful cheering on, dangerous candidates, hoping, Trump was the same thing. Oh, if Trump wins the primary in 16, we'll never lose. Well, look what happened. So, I think you got to be pretty humble about the fact that they could win with a moderate, but there's a risk for a moderate for them. It may mean like 18, the turnout's not as strong, and they may be too crazy on the right and scare away moderates, but that also may gin up turnout. I think you need to run, being scared of any scenario and working really hard. I think it can be done, but I've seen a little bit of celebration from Democrats, like, oh yeah, if it's Jim Jordan, that'll just be great. Like, I learned my lesson when Rand Paul won Kentucky.
Yeah.
Don't think that someone can get too crazy, especially when a lot of the election in the midterm comes down to turnout and energy. If a right winger energizes the right people, they could go on to win.
Yeah. Is there any way to clone Sherrod Brown? Is there any way that we can get another one of those? Because you're gonna need someone to come out on the Democratic Party who's gonna have the same kind of appeal.
What I'd say is, if you look at 18, which was Trump was not on the ballot in 18. It was our best midterm since 06. It was better than 10. It was better than 14. Just like other states, our suburbs went blue. Sherrod won by more than he did in 12 when Obama got reelected. But here's what's interesting. You're not going to get Sherrod Brown. But if you get a candidate, Richard Cordray was our candidate for governor. Good guy. Ran a strong race. Made some mistakes, but overall ran a strong race. But Mike DeWine was a household name. So he won. Rich lost by under 4. You need someone who can get a little more than a third of the way between Cordray and Sherrod in 2018, and they're governor of Ohio. So it doesn't have to be just like Sherrod, but if they see the Sherrod map and if they can mimic some of his results in smaller towns in rural Ohio, do the same he did in the suburbs, and let's say, with a diverse ticket, make sure we're lifting turnout in our cities, as long as that person is halfway between Sherrod and Cordray, they just won the governor's seat. So, and that's true for Senate too. So it's doable. A lot of it depends on the candidates, obviously, but a lot of it depends on what's going on more broadly in the ecosystem. Is Biden really popular, so McConnell's the bad guy, or is it a midterm turnout against us? Because as we saw in 10 and 14, you sometimes have the party out of power is more energized. But it can be done in Ohio. This idea that Ohio is so red, it can't be. You can't say, if you look at 18, it's just not the case. Ohio can clearly be put in play. Trump being on the ballot obviously made things harder in 20, but 18 showed us far better than 14 and 10. Good candidates can win Ohio.
Yeah, but as you said an important thing there. A lot of it's, I think, going to depend on Joe Biden and what happens this next year.
Yes.
And are they going to be able to, in the Senate, get some stuff pushed through to get a rescue package? Are we going to be able to defeat the virus? I think if he does what he says he's going to do, by summer we get all of the people vaccinated that he's saying he wants to get vaccinated. We get this taken behind us, and we get moving on rebuilding our infrastructure. I think
Correct.
there's absolutely an incredible chance of taking Ohio. But if he doesn't, and we end up mired in the virus into the fall, we don't get an infrastructure bill, we don't get anything through the Senate, I think it's a done deal. And I hate saying that, but that's just me looking into my little crystal ball.
I totally agree. I mean, I think that there needs to be enough tangible results, and we've talked about this before, that our candidates for Congress, and we'll have new districts, and our candidates for Senate and governor can literally say, right now you show up in a lot of Ohio, the Democrats have not had a message. You're told you're a socialist, and all you're doing is playing defense. But if in 18 months you can say, oh, you see that new bridge down there? That's Joe Biden. Up for that. That's what we're doing. And it's good jobs that came with it. And it gave you opportunity. You're tied into the broader economy now. It's got to be enough. And I've talked about this before. It's like when Obama ran for re-election in 12, it was who saved the auto industry? Obama did. Guess what? Ohioans understood that. So I think it's got to be the pandemic, but more. It's got to be infrastructure, and it's got to be in enough communities that people are like, yeah, you know what? My town got something too, and they didn't forget us. So I think that tangible result is going to be really important for Biden. But also, if you have a battle against Jim Jordan versus, let's say, Tim Ryan, I don't know who the Senate candidate is going to be. If Tim Ryan has been part of the Biden team that led to that good stuff and Jordan voted against it all, then we got something to talk about in those towns. If our candidate or supports or voted for local government support for firefighters and first responders and Jim Jordan voted against that, and it's part of a relief package, they're the ones defunding the police, not us.
Right.
So I do think that stuff matters. And that's why I do think, and I'm a huge Obama fan, but they've got to be more aggressive coming out of the gate right now. Even though they have less numbers in the Senate, they got to have tangible results that they can run on in 22 and not get mired in, needing to have, a bunch of Republican senators singing Kumbaya, because I think it's pretty clear that's not going to happen.
It's never going to happen. And look, the vote today on whether to table the impeachment showed us that put on the trial you're going to put on, Republicans are never going to convict.
Yeah. So I do think, by the way, I really, so far, it's clear to me that Biden's learned that lesson.
No,
They are,
look,
they
day
are
one.
aggressive.
Absolutely. Day one.
They are putting it out there. Good for them. The one thing I'd say though, and this is more the political side. The other thing, again, I don't want to criticize, but we learned the lesson. There was sort of a saying almost, or a notion in the Obama presidency. If we get the policy right, that'll be translated very well. We don't need to worry about the politics. No, you do. You need, and Jamie Harrison, the DNC chair, has talked about this a lot, and he and I talked about this. You need to have state parties and county parties communicating at the local level in tangible ways the Biden message locally. Hey, it's great he said that in Washington, but the local party is saying, but look down the street. It's on the ground here. So it needs to be relentless communication to the local level about what these things in Washington mean, as opposed to hoping in this crazy world of everything we're dealing with, social media, that it naturally flows to it's not going to do that. You've got to aggressively communicate it locally. And so I think, the DNC and Jamie Harrison and state parties are going to have a big role to play to make sure the message is always down on the local level about why Biden and Harris are actually making a difference.
Yeah. No, I mean, and look, and it's not like you're reinventing the wheel. You're not Magellan discovering new territory. This is what the Republicans have been doing masterfully for the last 30 years. So it's about that retail politic. It's about, getting in people's face, shaking hands, and having those conversations and building an infrastructure to do just that. And also having the policy right that gets through. And what I'm happy about today is that Schumer didn't cave on the filibuster rule. For me, at some point, we've got to deal with allowing one senator to hold up any progress. My compromise would be very simple. We'll keep the filibuster. As long as you're willing to hold the floor, as long as you're willing to get behind that podium and talk as long as you can filibuster till the cows come home. But this nonsense, we're going to do it behind closed doors and one guy can hold. Enough of that nonsense.
Yeah. No, I at the very least, I agree with that. I mean, I think it's a fair debate. We're very close. But yeah, I've never understood why they don't say, okay, we'll let's do it. Go for it. And we'd see what happened. But no, I think they need to be aggressive. I mean, the other thing is, and this is beyond infrastructure, not to be too the sky is falling, although I think we all are probably right to always be in that mode after a coup attempt. We've got 2 years to lock in protections for voters and democracy. And 22 could be good, it could be bad, but it goes the wrong way in 22. You're going into 24. I mean, a different makeup in the House could lead to a different result in a close election. I mean, I think we all sadly can see that. So locking in voting rights protections, locking in other protections, reforms against things like emoluments. I mean, we got 2 years to protect this democracy about from what follows 22. And Chuck Schumer's talking about that too. He went through it last night on Rachel Maddow, but we really have to be serious about those things. And again, no holds barred. These things have to happen.
Yeah, it's like a machine.
I'm very worried if we just sort of if we're so polite that we don't let them get them through.
And where I would disagree with you say we got 2 years. I go, we got one. You really got 1 year.
Yeah.
That second year is trying to run for re-election.
Correct.
But for me, right now, it's these next couple of months, really. Do we get that recovery package? That rescue package out quickly? How badly do the Democrats allow themselves to water it down? I think is a big issue. And then the infrastructure. We've got to get something done to where we're creating jobs on the other side of this.
Absolutely. And it's got to be, that's the part where it's got to be, branded, packaged broadly enough that people across the state like Ohio see it as benefiting them. It matters in their community. And I think in the past, it hasn't felt that way as much as it needs to.
So my last guest brought up an interesting point where, can't the Democrats figure out how to make it, the sweetener enough for Joe Manchin and Simina to come along and say, hey, we'll get you whatever you need. We're going to put building projects in your district. We're going to, rebuild West Virginia and Arizona and all. Just come along. Give us the ability to move the car out of the garage. Is there no way you can do that?
I mean, I think there needs to be, and here's the thing about, the opposition. If we were able to start moving forward on stuff like that, I think it could really change minds. I tweeted something today. Like, there's a town near me called Manchester, Ohio, on the Ohio River. Rob Portman was the congressman there for 12 years. He's been senator for 12 years, but it was in his district. And if you walk down its main street today, every storefront's empty. Like, this is a guy that Rob Portman was as connected as anyone in Washington could be, could call the Bushes, could call the Koch brothers. Yet even so for this little town, they had the greatest congressman they could have. And look at it. It's a disaster zone. It basically shows you, even in the best case scenario, the GOP agenda fails our smaller towns. And if we were able in a year through our agenda to say, hey, you know how it's been nothing for 20 years when Republicans were in charge? Well, if we're in charge for a year and we start to show real progress, that changes minds. Like, these are folks who've seen promise after promise not happen. And if we can actually, ram these things through, get them done, and people think, my God, we finally have a new Main Street. We finally have, the flood protection, so we feel comfortable building new whatever it is. That progress, I think, is what feeds more progress.
Absolutely.
And so I think that one reason I think Republicans want to stop that stuff is because they know that if they were to see a Democratic agenda happening, they'd see it benefits them. And the reason they get real cheap and don't want any of it is because I think that the politics of a broad infrastructure bill with good jobs and new developments in towns that haven't seen them in years would be a political, home run for the Democrats that pushed it. And my hope is, that would be true in West Virginia as much as it is in Ohio, and people would see that.
No, and it's kind of hard to keep people angry and all wadded up when they've got a decent job and they're able to put food on the table and they don't have to worry about where the next meal is coming from or worry about being thrown out of their home. So for me, it comes back to that old Reagan question, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?
Yeah.
And that becomes that kind of thing that an agenda's got to get moving forward. So last question I've got for you, because, this has got to get moving. How do you see the Democrats moving forward on this? Does Schumer use budget reconciliation to move through on this rescue package? How do you see this playing out?
I mean, I don't want to be claimed to be a Senate expert, but my sense from him, from interviews recently, the one last night, is he and Joe Biden seem to get the need to move, and it was very close, but we are now in the majority. And my sense and hope is that they're not gonna. I read Obama's biography the other day. Like, it's so painful to read about that year and a half of waiting for Chuck Grassley to get religion on healthcare. Like, as everything just fell away. I think they've all learned that lesson. And my hope is that they're very aggressive, like they were to win that original deal with McConnell. They just got to keep doing that. And I think if they communicate it well, so it's popular, it's great that Biden is looking like he's getting 60% more of approval. That needs to happen as well. It needs to be really smart communication. So the Republicans who are objecting feel like they're on the wrong side of this politically.
No, we got to make lives better. That's how you win this stuff. It's that simple. David, I appreciate the time. Good talking to you, my friend.
Great talking to you as always. Take care.
Good stuff. David Pepper, former chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party. Going to take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1907. That was the day that President Theodore Roosevelt signed into law an effort to get corporate money out of national politics. The law was called the Tillman Act. The act was named after its chief sponsor, Senator Benjamin Tillman of South Carolina. President Roosevelt had fallen under public criticism for taking corporate money in his 1904 run for office. After he won the race, he included the issue in his address to Congress. Teddy said, "All contributions by corporations to any political committee for any political purpose should be forbidden by law." The resulting Tillman Act covered national banks and corporations, but the act had no real enforcement provisions. Since the passage of the Tillman Act, Congress has moved to further regulate campaign financing more than 10 times. Labor union contributions were regulated for the first time during World War II. During the war, unions were strictly prohibited from direct political donations. During the 1944 election, for the first time, the CIO, the Congress of Industrial Organizations, set up a political action committee. The PAC was to support pro-labor candidates and legislation. 3 years later, however, limits on union political spending were beefed up even further by the Taft-Hartley Act. The role of corporations and unions in campaign finance continues to be a hotly contested issue. In 2010, the United States Supreme Court decided the landmark case Citizens United. Their decision ruled that money equals speech. Corporations and unions can spend as much as they want on elections as long as they don't coordinate directly with individual campaigns. This has led to a flood of money by very wealthy donors into super PACs. More than a century after the passage of the Tillman Act, we still have not solved the question of election financing.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if one of the names being tossed around there in Ohio for Senate is Amy Acton. She's the former director of the Ohio Department of Health. Really, really popular. She's a Democrat who worked for a Republican governor. And I think David was telling me in the break, her approval rating somewhere in the high 60s. Someone who, outsider, very popular, good name recognition. So going to be interesting to see if and when she throws her name into the ring there. Anyway, before we wrap up, last Saturday we had our initial trivia night. Going to try and pitch that again. It was really extremely successful. Had a huge turnout, much bigger than I was anticipating. So thank you. But the topic last time was labor and Biden's plan to help workers organize and all of that stuff. It was a great night. This coming Saturday, 7 p.m. And we'll send out links on how folks can register and sign up. But we're going to be talking about infrastructure. I know, what a super sexy topic. But one of the things that I think is important is knowing just how bad or how good our infrastructure is, and what we need to do, and what the administration's talking about doing. So, going to have an interesting time talking about that. I hope folks will join us Saturday, 7 p.m. Mark the calendars. That's Eastern time for our infrastructure trivia night. Going to have some special guests coming in. Last week it was Congressman Eric Swalwell. This week we're looking for someone right around that area. So looking forward to that. Also we're going to play Name That Traitor. So fun there as well. Last story of the day: Oklahoma Attorney General. Evidently, the Oklahoma Attorney General's office has been tasked with returning $2 million worth of hydroxychloroquine. It doesn't work. So now they've got all of this anti-malaria drug stockpiled in Oklahoma. Just kind of throwing that out there. Just kind of throwing that out. It's Oklahoma, home of the Dust Bowl. Anti-malaria drug. Yeah. Maybe they should just donate it. Maybe they get a tax write-off. Donate it, to somewhere, that has a malaria problem. Kind of a thought. Wouldn't that be a nice thing if they did that? because they're not going to get their money back. So they, thanks to Donald Trump, just whizzed away $2 million. So glad that era is over. Anyway, if you missed any of tonight's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Big days ahead as we count down to our Saturday night trivia night. Make sure you tune in. Thanks for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to